mycelium. So I started to do research and I realized, holy cow, this is like the underpinnings and the basis, the foundation of everything that's above it, that all of the networks, that all of the nerves, that all of the communications, from the plants, trees, flowers, especially from the moss, they're all rooted in this super foundational layer of, I can only say what might be like the central nervous system, the web of like feeling and carrying great responsibility that does such powerful work. And that's what I want us all to tap into today. I want to remind you that because that exists underneath us, and because we are made of that same earth, that does exist in us also. That super foundational, really primal level of knowledge and love that will show us how to carry ourselves through the absolute chaos and insanity that is ensuing literally around the globe, that we have so many people are feeling hopeless in. I can't change what's happening in Gaza right now. I can't change what's happening in the Congo. I can't change any of the ongoing genocides, including of our people on these lands, which I'm hoping that more and more people start to make the connection that while they are outraged at what's happening around the world, I also need you to be outraged and act on that about what is happening here and what has been happening here for over 200 years. And not to center us in any way, not to co-opt, because we are faring far better than our Palestine brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, babies are. So now it's our turn to rise. So if we take care of ourselves, we can also be there to have like 3 minutes to listen to someone else while they share what they need to let out, and knowing that like not everything is your work, not everything is your knowledge. In Hunkaminam, we don't say I don't know. We say awa tinislakalo, which means it is not my knowledge. So if that isn't my knowledge, then maybe that is. And maybe that is my work and that isn't. And maybe that's my medicine and that isn't. We don't all have to carry it all the time. It's okay to put it down. It's okay to put it down and decide what you'll pick up if you pick up anything. And I feel like that's what comes to me from the intention of, and the medicine of, and the beauty of that magic that lives underneath the current. It's like the way the trees communicate, like the first tree that's cut down sends out a message. How does it get to the other trees? And they start sending up the shoots right away. In doing research about these things, I realized like how much more magical the world is than I already was aware of. So I want you to tap into the magic and the beauty.
Say this because I find a lot of bureaucratic processes within art culture norms seem to be very, it's almost like it just gets in the way at times. And it slows things down when, and I know people are really caught up into this like concept of a sense of urgency, but I think it's very real and needs to be stated that there are states of urgency when people are in a crisis, when people are looking for housing, they don't have housing, when maybe they don't, maybe they have a very low income rental, but they struggle to pay rent or eat or just get those basic things. And that's a very, very real state of urgency that I think people take for granted, especially if you are someone that uses drugs. And so sometimes it does look like, well, I'm not going to worry about that right now. And sometimes it does look like I'm not going to care about that. But it's because I understand that there are things that need to be prioritized. And so it gets messy sometimes because to care about certain people, we have to stop caring about other things, unfortunately, is how it is. And for some people, that culture, that norm, which I'm just going to say a lot of the time is based in whiteness, is not helpful, you know. And I think about it a lot of the time, that cultural norm that we've come into in this place in the world, this settler state, it's caused us so much havoc.
So like letting go of industry standards, fighting creative ways to circumvent is a better word, the bureaucracy, and finding ways to pay artists for doing less. And that's going to feel really weird.
That's controversial.
I know. I'm a controversial guy. I'm like, hey, we're having this event where we all have a nap together, and there's an honorarium, and we're going to pay you. Like, those are the kinds of events I want to see being put on for the arts community.
In terms of artist care. But, you know, I think of the things that I got involved with early in the pandemic, after I lost my job, and everybody was kind of getting really urgent about stuff when actually shit was already broken before, right? It's just that somebody like poured gasoline and lit it, and then it was like, no, listen, you really gotta do something now. Right? And if anything, we learned, like, we can actually do something. Those institutions can move quickly when they need to, right? And so I kind of hang on to that. It's like, this program was able to like reallocate money, get it out really quickly in a really simple application. We were able to do that. So what are we going to do with that knowledge now? Right? We were able to network together and pull a bunch of money from different sources to do micro grants in a really quick way relative to how we worked before. And so, like, how do we continue to remember that?
I mean, I think it's clear to anyone who's paying attention how much grief, like, the world is thick with it right now. And I think we have, as like we have en masse sort of forgotten to tend to our grief in some really important ways. And, you know, that's all part of the capitalism machine. So I think it's really important for me to slow down, to be patient enough for whatever the ceremony needs, to ground myself in ritual, because the world is always like throwing another wave of chaos at you. And having these like moments, these like systems that enforce rhythm of pause means that even though the world is throwing these things at me, I will be grounded in this system that I've created for myself. I'll be grounded in this worship or veneration or attention or care that I have chosen, and not this thing that's been sort of foisted upon me.
Yeah, the forest really helps us to breathe deeper. Yeah, especially with the fog, hey? Oh, look at that joy. Look at the joy and hope. That was such a fun play on words and names. And so I was sharing this morning, but I'd share a lot with people about how, you know, when you're having a really hard day, it's really good to kind of stop and think about where's your closest green space, where's even the closest forest. And you get into the forest, and the first thing you do is just stop. Yeah, you just stop and you look around and close your eyes and take a moment to breathe deeply. Because in the city, we can't really breathe deeply. It's kind of scary to breathe in those colonial toxins and industrial toxins and all the things that make us choke and struggle to breathe. And it's the opposite in the forest. The forest is where all the magic happens, and not just in under the ground in the mycelium network, not just up in the trees where the birds are hanging out and squirrels, but if we had special glasses to put on, we could see the spores floating in the air on a misty day, on a foggy day.
And I feel like there's this huge disconnect, and I don't know what the solution is necessarily to that, but I see that it's like talking about two different worlds, two different languages. So it's really hard to even come into a conversation thinking or assuming that we're even talking the same language. So I feel like that's a big gap that happens, and then from there, it's just really hard to have meaningful conversations when you're, and a little bit what you're sharing too, when you're just coming from a completely different experience. Yeah, and I think too, the idea of institutions being somehow outside of humans too, which is really interesting. So you're not even talking a human to a human sometimes, you're talking to an institution, which also is really unbalancing and disorienting, because all of the kind of social cues that would normally be there aren't the same in that way. Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically for myself about my own reactions to when anger comes into the room and how that kind of makes me personally shut down quite a bit. And some of the things that I'm trying to learn about anger, and this comes from kind of working with an incredible facilitator named Camille Dumond, who has taught me a lot about conflict transformation. And one of the things that she said was like, sometimes anger is the only reasonable response to what's happening. And so for me, I'm trying to understand that as like, we think of the surface of things and a certain kind of professionalness as composure, but actually composure is completely, it's not appropriate at this time. Or in some situations. And so I'm trying to find room in myself to understand that as part of a bigger picture and less about my own feelings in the moment. And also, I think it's also like the gift that anger or conflict gives us is to highlight something that's happening in the room already and was already going to be there anyway. So someone maybe is emotional when they say it, but it's on the part of the group. And so I think that's something that also helps me understand, like, this is in the service of a larger question, and I wanna be there for that larger conversation, even if it's really difficult for me.
I think that there is a danger to sometimes trying to deal with things alone, trying to deal with things privately, or the organizational world is internally, and you signed a confidentiality agreement. And the problem is that can be weaponized. There are some people who are very abusive in this sector that are very good at weaponizing that confidentiality, very good at weaponizing lawyers and fear and abusing their power. So I am in a position right now where I do feel that I can talk about some of the things that have happened to me in this sector. And the worst decision I made in conflict was trying to address it with integrity, with compassion, with privacy. And not the compassion part, but the privacy part for sure. Because I was immediately slapped with you say anything about this and you done, right?
We have to like all take a bit more responsibility on, so that it's not just these people that have been consistently doing it on their own. So just curious about if anybody has any suggestions on how to build those muscles.
Well, I've been doing this a long time. I think the stakes are different for everyone, and that's something that we should all like reflect. I don't want any of us like all of us to leave here and just instantly start fighting with folks. That's my technique. I think we all, but the thing is, we all need a diversity of tactics, right? We can't all be, and this is something I learned from Audrey Siegel, we can't all be the arrowhead. Some of us have to be the bow. Some of us have to be the feather. Some of us has to be the finger pulling the string back, right? We can't all just hit the streets. It is unsustainable. We'll burn out. What we can do is look at what tools we have and see where it fits into the bigger picture. So for me, the language I speak is the one of anger, because I know how to mold it, I know how to move it, and I know, as a person who's had to be an activist and fighting for the rights of many folks and many folks of different experiences in my own experience, is I can see where the cracks are. I know where to put the pressure, and I know when I'm tired, I know there are people I can go to take care of me until I'm ready to do that work again. And those people who take care of me are just as valuable in all of it together. And so building that muscle is understanding what kind of muscle is it. Not all of us have the hands that can hold the thing, but they have the hands that can move the bodies of those around them.
When I think about the earliest days of colonial violence, I wasn't alive. It was between 150 and 500 years ago. And I think about how terrifying it would have been to live during that time, and how quickly our people were being murdered and isolated and systematically removed from homelands and having our children taken away. And I think about that, and all of the assimilationist and genocidal policies that were put upon our people here. And what I think is that we were known as the vanishing race, and that we were seen as we were to perish. We were not supposed to be here. We are mathematically impossible. We were not supposed to exist. We're supposed to be done. But somehow, all of the resistance that people have always engaged in, and still engage in today, is why we are here, and why we still, whether it's precariously or not, we're still speaking our language. But you've got to figure out, going into a situation, what do you want from it? And I think it's really fair when we're thinking about conflict, that there is not one kind of conflict, and therefore there cannot be one kind of solution. And do people even want a solution? So white supremacy has this thing where it teaches us that we should all just be kind of docile and pleasant. And any departure from that is like, that's a conflict. But sometimes, it's like if we look at the land, sometimes we look at the land and the places where the land has been ravished by maybe a fire. And maybe the fire wasn't caused naturally. Maybe the fire was caused by clear cutting and having like one type of tree, and so therefore it's more primed for forest fire. It's less resilient, it's less robust. And so then, if we just use that as an example of what is the solution isn't necessarily to go and make it pretty. The solution might be, leave it alone. Let it show you how it wants to heal. Let it tell you, and that it doesn't just have to look good on the outside. And I think that's one of the things about conflict, is that, first of all, I think we see just a regular disagreement as conflict. I think that's really problematic. And then I think we see as like, we need to make it better. That's our job, is to sort of smooth it over. But actually the scars are really important because they're part of the story and the desire of each person. Somebody might want to do healing. They may not be ready for it. They may not have the supports and the resources, and they might just not want to do healing. They really might just want to be like, it's time to like slash tires. It's time to get that fucking person fired. And like, that's, as long as that's on the table and we can have that as a conversation, I think that works. And you know, people are woven into the laws of what is right and what is natural, but not hierarchically. So if we put humans at the top of the hierarchy, I think we've made a fundamental error, because a great amount of our learning actually isn't coming from humans, it's coming from what's around us. And that doesn't have to be in human form. So if we limit it to just humans, and that this is a human-centric conversation to take our cues on behalf of other humans, then I think we've missed it a bit. The land is made up of many seasons. And like right now, we're in the season of Huasalenoch, and Huasalenoch is the shaker of leaves. It's the moons that are the shaker of the leaves. And so it's the time when we're doing a lot of shedding. And Huasalenoch is like active wind, like it's active movement. And it's going to bring us into this incredibly still and quiet time, which is snowy, and it looks like everything around us is dead, but it's still. And so that impatience, if we're like, but those flowers are supposed to be, well, they're still there, and they will return. And so actually, rather than linear, if we think of ourselves as part of those seasons, and that the land around us will show us that it actually, we need rest time. We need time to not be actively pursuing growth and change.
Water song. Today we are calling upon the water spirits. Water is very powerful. It can make pathways through stone. It can break the ground open with spring runoff. It can provide growth to plants, animals, and medicines. It cleanses and creates life. We are made of water and float in our mother's water before we are born into this earth. Water is sacred. Water is everything. Water is connection. Water is medicine. Water is life. Water is healing. It can heal your broken spirit. When you cry tears of anger, pain, or fear, tears are water, which can carry away your troubles and cleanse your broken heart. When you go into the water to pray, you can ask it to carry away your tears and bring it to the Creator to be cleansed and made pure again. The negative energy cleansed by these tears is so strong, it can be used again by someone else who needs its strength. Ask the Creator to bring this cleansed energy to someone else who needs it. You can pray in the river, ocean, stream, or even in the shower. All water comes from one source, the Creator, who creates life and provides us with all we want and need. Water is closely connected to the moon. Mother Earth and our bodies are made of 3/4 water. The moon guides all of our cycles. It tells you when to sleep, when to plant, when to grow, when to harvest, when to hunt, when to gather medicines, and when to cleanse your body, and when to create life. When the moon is full, we are full. When it wanes, we begin anew, cleansed mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
I saw this quote by Bruce Lee in that when we are under duress, we do not rise to our expectations, we rise to our level of training. And, you know, I mean, he's the OG for a reason, but it's just like if we don't exercise our humility and our ability to understand what white supremacy and capitalism have done to us and continue to do, then we will continue to fail. But we will do it like better and better with fancier words and, you know, with longer PDF statements. And it just gets more complex and harder to untangle when it's so very simple.
But the higher up you go in the institution in terms of its hierarchies, it looks very different. I go to meetings where I'm in a room of all white people all the time. I sometimes count in my head how many times that happens in a day. It can be 6, 7, who knows? So I do think that there can be obviously blind spots in that type of structure, and professionalism, the issues, it dictates that you function in a certain way inside of these institutions, or you always just become that person who's always saying that thing, and you become marginalized in that space. And so I do think to this question of the exhaustions that come up working inside of institutions, inside of structures, be it arts organizations, when you have the types of funding that are out there, there is a kind of state-driven structure of the arts sector or the nonprofit sector broadly. And so I think in these spaces where we have higher expectations, when we see the same things unfold, it doesn't leave you in a good place. And so I think having those support networks of friends and allies outside of those places where these things can be talked through in a particular way.
And I think, yeah, there's a bit of danger in this whole EDI industrial complex that we're just creating new jobs for a select few marginalized people to find a space of comfort in under capitalism, where we're palatable enough to be at the table and to have the conversations. Change isn't necessarily happening, doors aren't necessarily opening, and I think it's just really, really important to remember like why we're there and what it took to get there, and that we're not done yet. Just because we're here does not mean that we're done yet, and that for so many people, their voices are not welcome in the room. So yeah, I think just being a bit self-critical here.
This anger that we talk about inside ourselves and in our communities, using that, channeling that to critique, basically tell people off as often as you can and as brutally as you can, and get away with it as much as you can and shock people and disturb people with what you have to say, because what we're dealing with is completely disturbing. The things that we have to witness inside of these institutions and everywhere else is totally disturbing. And like, if people are not disturbed by what they're seeing, we need to make sure that they are. We need to put it right in their face. And like, every day that we go on, there's never a better time to take a risk. And if you're someone with enough privilege to do so, learn sacrifice and take a risk.
It is important to also note, and this is a big one, that there can be access needs in a space that do not flow with one another, right? What do you do? Right? Well, clearly you march everyone out and just keep the people that don't have access needs. No, I mean, the situations that come up may not be able to exist simultaneously in the same room. That happens. But hopefully, if you build the container well, if you start it in identifying that we're all part of contributing to holding the collective space, there will be some degree of understanding when it's like, okay, I don't know, it's a darkened room and someone needs to have their phone on because they're doing something with their phone that keeps them regulated, and the light from the phone is pushing up against somebody else's access need, right? And maybe you have the capacity to give some spaciousness so that those access needs can exist simultaneously in the same space, but sometimes no. And so what I offer is that I would just own it. Like, here's the situation, here's what can be offered. If this isn't going to work for you, if this is in some way lessening your joy, what can we do? Is it something where there's another event that they could come back to? If it's like performances, if it's something that's only a one-off, is it being recorded that it could be offered in that way?
I heard my name, did you call me? Did you speak truth when you dug wounds, when you spilled blood? Did you say love when you promised you won't betray? Remnants of the brands on my skin like a Van Ryn painting. Pale-faced isolation, the slow beast overtaken. Black belladonna beauty queens, they true too can't imitate my voodoo. Conquering queens, condemning our culture and blood spills. For bank accounts to government bills. Sinners and soldiers defile in indigenous hills. Valleys, mountains, waters carrying ancestral will. The scene's ill, littered with colonial violence. Accepted by masses while missing women are silenced. Corporate profit prioritized, they act in compliance. This land calls for liberty, we crying defiance. Convenience brings no ease, got us trapeze gliding for tiny finance. Your glitter ain't gold, it's just a reminder. Separation to confine us, but in mind where your mind is. The truth, the way your true shine is. Divine alignment. I heard my name, did you call me? Did you speak truth when you dug wounds, when you spilled blood? Did you say love when you promised you won't betray?